A window in the wall. He repeated the phrase to himself 10 times or more, finding it brimming with meaning that could entice the reader at first glance. He decided to write it down in bold letters at the bottom of a yellow sheet from his pocket notebook, whose contents were scattered sentences and smudges of pencil marks. Perhaps he had finally found the perfect title for his story. He tugged at his earlobe, savoring the delight of a man rediscovering something lost after much toil. Yet as he whispered the title once more, his excitement dimmed, and the words now seemed like a grain of rice lost in a box of pasta. He placed the notebook beside his cup of coffee and bent over his manuscript, combing through the maze of words in search of an ending worthy of the tale. The monk lay under a vine trellis, his heart restless, his body trembling as if with a fever. By sunrise, he had bolted upright, frantic and terrified, his limbs trembling as though stricken by a great calamity. His lips parted in a ghostly smile, one akin to the haunted expressions of the broken-hearted. No sound escaped his rapidly quivering lips. There was no one around, and no sound to be heard except the bickering of 2 storks nesting in thorny branches above the monastery. "Woe to me! What has happened to me?" he thought, slapping his face and bowing his head. Then, aloud, with a sigh of despair, he cried, "Where are you, Lord?" The storyteller's fingers burrowed into the pockets of his coat, seeking warmth, when the waiter's voice interrupted his thoughts. Heavy raindrops began to fall, inching toward his table and promising a stronger downpour to come. The waiter asked if he wanted to move inside. He shook his head. Neither rain nor cold could trouble him as much as the monk's agonized cry to the Lord. Inhaling deeply the scent of wet earth to calm his frayed nerves, he crossed his legs, lit a cigarette with his father's old brass lighter, and stared blankly at the silver ring on his little finger. A pall swept over his face in an instant. The monk's cry to the Lord seemed strained and hollow, too contrived to ring true. The reader would see through it at once. Readers are sharper than that. They never blindly accept. They either love or reject, never lingering in between. Dropping the cigarette, but into the last sip of coffee in his cup, he underlined the monk's cry in pencil, marking it for deletion or revision later. Alone on the terrace, he braved the sharp chill by returning to his story. He dove into it once more. There is no greater calamity than a man of faith losing that faith. Our monk discovered, to his horror, that he no longer clung to the Father Lord. He no longer believed in him. His soul was now branded with the gravest of sins. His complexion faded as he flailed his fists in the air, like a wounded spirit striking at emptiness. Despair drove him to embark on a journey to the Holy See in the Vatican. Only the Pope, he believed, could save him from the clutches of apostasy or the devil. Upon reaching the Vatican, he requested an audience with His Holiness as a bishop from France, bearing a matter of utmost importance not just to himself but to Christianity as a whole. A Swiss guard apologized, explaining that His Holiness was in sacred retreat and could not be disturbed. He suggested the bishop speak with a cardinal instead, but the monk insisted on meeting the Pope, claiming that the issue transcended the cardinal's authority and placed the entire Catholic Church at stake. Sensing the gravity of the situation, the Swiss guard asked him to wait while he sought permission. Moments later, the bishop was ushered into the sacred retreat, where the Pope knelt before a statue of Jesus Christ. Upon seeing the Pope, the bishop fell to his knees, trembling and weeping as he kissed the Pope's feet, begging for mercy and guidance. "Calm yourself, my son, and tell me what troubles you," the Pope said, tracing the sign of the cross over his head. "Save me, Holy Father. I have no refuge but you. I no longer believe in the Lord." The Pope faltered briefly, then leaned closer to whisper in the bishop's ear, "Pretend to believe, my son." The storyteller leaned back in his chair, repeating the Pope's words to himself. "Pretend to believe, my son." The phrase felt dull and disjointed, its teeth misaligned, as if penned by a charlatan crafting a trinket. The words clashed, their tone discordant. Words are the difference between a prophet and a harlot, the poet Abdulrahman al-Sharkawi had said. The storyteller had hoped for a smooth and satisfying ending, but this tale, no matter how much he yearned for it, pushed him away like a coy woman resisting advances. He gazed at raindrops clinging to the slender branches of the shrubs lining the terrace. He strained to find words that would resonate and linger, but they eluded him, defiant and temperamental like cats. Frustrated, he abandoned the effort, knowing well that words have a will of their own. A violent shiver ran through him as a gust of cold wind slapped him. Adjusting his coat, he braced himself against the solitude when something caught his eye. Under the terrace of an abandoned house across the café, a lone figure sat on a heap of clothes, engrossed in a book, oblivious to the rain and cold. He froze, transfixed by the sight of this reader in the rain. If he were a painter, he thought, he would immortalize the scene in vivid hues and frame it for posterity. Nothing else could have stirred his curiosity, but to see someone drenched in reading amidst the drizzle felt like witnessing a lighthouse standing firm in a stormy night. Curiosity burned within him, urging him to approach. He snapped his fingers, glanced around as if seeking permission, then called the waiter, paid his bill, and pocketed the change. Stuffing his hands into his coat pockets, he strode toward the reader. When only 2 steps away, a sharp vertigo gripped him, as if he had taken his first deep drag of hashish. The reader was a young woman, likely in her 20s, draped in a makeshift blue plastic cloak shielding her from the rain. In her right hand, a nearly extinguished cigarette. In her left, a book whose title he could not make out. Rain soaked his coat, the cold seeping through like icy threads behind his ears and down his neck to his navel. A shiver ran through him, making his lips tremble as he summoned his voice. "Excuse me, miss," he began, his tone timid. "May I ask what you're reading?" She looked up as if waking from a dream and turned her face toward him, silent and wide-eyed. Furrowing her brows, she lifted a hand as though plucking an idea from the air, then gestured for him to leave. Her dismissal, though curt, felt like a cleansing deluge washing away his grime. He took no offense. She took a final drag from her cigarette, stubbed it out with her foot, and resumed her reading, lips moving as if savoring the taste of the words. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught a glimpse of the book's title, The Harafish. Its colors confirmed it. It was Naguib Mahfouz's The Harafish. Could it be, he wondered, that Uncle Naguib's words have captivated her, wrapping her in warmth and serenity while the world around her is cold and callous? The image of the girl etched itself into his memory. He returned home, yearning for the warmth of a boiling hot bath. Blowing warmth into his frozen fingers, he struggled to unlock his door. Once inside, he hastened to his small library, pulling out The Harafish from a top shelf. He opened the book and began to read. He made his way forward with the tip of his heavy cane, his guide through eternal darkness. Mawley knew his way by scent, by counting steps, by the clarity of hymns and inner inspiration. Before finishing the first page, he felt a sweet warmth radiate within him. "It's Uncle Naguib," he murmured. "It's him, the solace of the girl who found warmth in his words to resist the chill of life and weather." As he removed his coat to light the heater, a sudden inspiration struck him, illuminating his mind like the break of dawn. The bishop who lost God